AI, ironically, even though it will have this potential to obliterate a lot of jobs, it's actually presenting, as all technologies do, an opportunity for people to rise above it and to leverage it and not fear it.
Better Innovation is hosted by Jeff Saviano, EY Global Tax Innovation Leader. This isn't just about innovation. This is better innovation.
Hello, Better Innovation listening audience. Welcome back. Season 3. Our focus for this season is on artificial intelligence. AI will make such a significant impact in our professional and our personal lives. We've decided here with this third season to go all in. We're going all in as deep as we can to help you better understand AI and how AI will impact not just your professional life, but our personal lives as well. I'm thrilled to have as our first guest for the season a friend of ours here at EY. His name is Bob Suh. Bob is the founder and CEO of a firm called OnCorps. Bob has published behavioral economics articles in Harvard Business Review and also the Financial Times. Prior to OnCorps, Bob was the chief technology strategist at Accenture. He was also the chief strategy officer for the firm's technology division. And I'm really proud to say that Bob's an alum of EY. He was with us back in the mid to late 80s. Bob is quite accomplished. He was named by Consulting Magazine to their top 25 consultants list. He's an alum of Harvard University's Kennedy School and his bachelor's from the University of Southern California. We had such a great discussion about the work of OnCorps and how they help companies make better decisions and achieve better outcomes with AI. Bob's written a lot of really interesting pieces lately about how to optimize the effectiveness of algorithms. He's got such a unique point of view. His comparison of algorithmic decision-making with somebody that has a particularly high EQ, I think, is so unique in the field. Take a listen. You're going to love this discussion. Hello, Better Innovation listening audience. Welcome back. Season 3 is finally upon us. I've been looking forward to this day for a long time now. Ever since, I can't believe, just a couple of months ago, we finished off with Season 2, and this season we have decided to focus on artificial intelligence. And once we made that decision, we were thrilled to launch this season with my friend and our first guest, Bob Suh. Bob, welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Jeff. Happy to be here.
You and I have now known each other for a couple of years. We've actually done some work together with EY and your firm OnCorps, and been really excited about helping to bring your message to our listening audience. I think you're doing some amazing things in the field, and excited to have you tell your story today.
Well, I'm happy to be here and wherever you'd like to take the conversation.
Well, first of all, early September, and as we drove into Cambridge today, that it seems like we had more traffic today than we have in the preceding months. We've got the kids back to school, and you had a good summer?
Very nice, yeah. Very busy.
It's nice that I know every time I see you that there's so many different initiatives that you're pursuing, and the work that you're pursuing at OnCorps has been so fascinating. And we're going to get into lots of interesting issues today. But first of all, would just love to have our audience hear a bit about what's your big idea. What was the big idea behind OnCorps? And there's been some really interesting pieces that you've written lately in Harvard Business Review. But what's your big contribution to the field, Bob?
When we started OnCorps and we started thinking about where systems should head in the future, we realized with AI, people had an opportunity to improve the way they make decisions and the way they work. But we realized that it was more complex to train algorithms than we had thought. And I dare say it's more complex than most executives think it is. So when we started looking at what it would really take to train an algorithm to be effective at drawing out the kind of decisions and the kind of information that you'd be willing to share as a human decision maker, we realized that even in day-to-day personal interactions, you hold back information. So, for example, when a young person in my office goes on a date, they tell their roommate and their mother two completely different stories about the same incident. In other words, they're sharing selectively information to protect either their personal privacy or to prevent some embarrassing thing from coming out. And the problem with that with AI is that AI or systems today take what you tell it at face value. And we think that's a huge gap in the market, that the data that are provided to systems are not to be taken at face value. And if they are, they often get things wrong. And the way around that is to draw out from people the kind of information they normally wouldn't share. And the only way to do that is, we think there are two things that you need to do. First is protect the privacy of the individual. In other words, make them understand that by sharing information, there'll be no negative repercussions. So if you're sharing more data about bad deals and you're a salesperson, that you won't automatically be fired or subjected to a bonus cut. That you're sharing information to improve your decision making, and you should be given the opportunity to improve that decision making over time.
A transparency.
Yeah, and a confidence level.
Right.
The way you would draw on whether you know it or not, you automatically assign different confidence levels to people you speak with. And if you know them really well and you have a history of them not sharing information that you share with them, you tend to share more. Similarly, when you get positive feedback or the kind of feedback that you value, you share more. But you don't do that with systems. Often you get annoyed by alerts, warnings. When you think about the way a system responds to you, it's often quite negative. There are often things that systems do to tell you that you're not doing something right. You didn't complete all the boxes. You're late on something. And you think about that problem, and you generally don't share a lot of information when you think of a system as being sort of a penalty alerter or provider. So we think that it's actually fairly straightforward, which is to add to algorithms an ability to think about the system's interaction as someone with high EQ, somebody that thinks carefully about how they respond to something you share. So in other words, not just being judgmental immediately when you share something sensitive.
Right.
And we think that as systems are trained, they can also be trained to elicit different kinds of information from you by being more context aware of what you're sharing, why you're sharing it, and be more thoughtful about how to respect your privacy and still draw out the kind of information the algorithm needs to help you make better decisions.
So much that we're going to unpack with that. And in essence, you're finding new ways to optimize algorithmic efficiencies and effectiveness.
Right.
Is that fair?
Exactly.
Okay. We're going to come back to it, Bob. I want to spend a little bit of time, and I think that our audience tells us that when we have our guest in on our podcast, love to get to know the guest a little bit. And so let's take your big idea of how you and your team at OnCorps finding new ways to optimize algorithmic theory, and let's focus a bit on how you got to where you are today. Where did you grow up, Bob? What's your background? Where are you from?
I grew up in Pasadena, California, right in Caltech's backyard, and my parents were Korean immigrants. So we didn't know much about the educational system in the U.S. I did a lot of internships and learned computer programming with extracurricular programs out of Caltech, and was drawn into technology at a very early stage.
And you didn't go to Caltech, you went to USC.
No, I went to USC actually as a music major and switched majors after I did the economic analysis of the career.
The career economic analysis of what life would have been like as a musician.
Right.
Are you still playing? What did you play?
I was a clarinet major, and I should have been I would have increased my odds of getting an orchestral position if I were a violin major. I neglected to count the number of clarinetists versus violinists in the orchestra, and I switched majors.
An early data analysis issue that you were facing as a young man.
Right.
Excellent. Are you still playing?
Not clarinet, but I play piano. I've just finished 5 years at the New England Conservatory in classical piano.
Oh, wonderful. It's nice that you're able to still keep your passion for music with all that you're doing.
Yeah, and I found also that piano playing and music in general are very closely affiliated with mathematics. I also tell people, I think, particularly piano playing, because you have both hands and your foot that you're working at the same time and you're reading symbols. It's like brain calisthenics.
You're firing the neurons in different ways.
Right.
In a way, right?
Right.
And that is really interesting. Can see how that must transcend into all that you're doing and the importance of mathematics and as the foundation for many of the theories. So from USC, you found your way to the Kennedy School here in Cambridge, where we're recording our podcast today.
I quickly realized that I wanted to focus in an area of applied economics called game theory. And I had the good fortune of working under and for Tom Schelling, who won the Nobel Economics Prize in 2005.
Oh, what a cool
experience.
And
he with Howard Rafa and John Nash were all contemporaries and all creating new frameworks using game theory at the time. So I was very fortunate to have learned game theory and decision science from some of the best in the world when I was quite young.
Was that the earliest formation of your ideas on game theory and decision systems that as a thread that runs through your work today, Bob? Would you trace it back to the Kennedy School?
Definitely. And it's interesting that back then, John Nash, Tom Schelling, Howard Rafa were all mathematicians. 2 of them won the Nobel. And now the people focusing on economics and decision-making are psychologists, which shows the shift from mathematical analysis to behavioral analysis, which I find fascinating. And I think that the Kennedy School has always been a very strong center for decision science, and it moved from mathematics to psychological, behavioral emphasis. Right now, Jennifer Lerner is sort of leading that at the Kennedy School, and she's a scientific advisor for us today.
And just given that it's the Kennedy School, that there's also a heavy dose of policy as well.
Right.
That the expertise and the particular public policy focus at the Kennedy School must help as well.
Definitely.
And so tell me a bit more about what was it, Bob, about decision-making systems that drew you to the field back in your time at the Kennedy School?
I think what was fascinating about it back then was that you could actually analyze your decisions and improve them. That is sort of counterintuitive when you think about it. I think that we are given a level of self-confidence which only an animal with no fur, fangs, or claws needs to have, because we needed something. And I think that the benefits we were given in nature were, in addition to a huge frontal lobe, an ability to cooperate, an ability to analyze our decisions and learn from them. And I think that what struck me the most about the Kennedy School and decision-making and decision science is, despite centuries of analysis, that we still make really boneheaded decisions as people, and we make them very predictably. So why can't we save enough money? Why don't we take better care of ourselves? Why are we very poor at dieting? I think that there are so many things, and in business, it's even, in my opinion, even worse. And I think we cling to perceptions about what good decision-making is, and the numbers don't bear it out. And I think that's particularly been true in baseball, where you see teams spending millions of dollars on player salaries. For example, a home run hitter can make 20 times more than somebody with a high on-base percent statistic. And home runs are only 4% of all scored runs. So I think that when you actually look at the statistics and analyze how we make decisions and what we're drawn to, you often find that they lack logic. And so that, to me, is just a big opportunity. It's an opportunity to improve not only society, but, the businesses and the personal decisions that we make. And it just runs counter to the way we think, because we're imbued with, I think, an overconfidence that makes us almost neglect the data that we see or the evidence we see. We're still very bullheaded as people, and we get something in our idea. Like, for example, I mean, saving money. I think we all believe, well, that wouldn't be me. I'm never going to be in that situation. And so we ignore some of the warning signs and continue to spend thinking that some miracle will occur, or, I'm not really calculating that correctly or whatever. And I think that people really, they just put blinders on, and I think their brain does that to them. And Daniel Kahneman pointed that out quite astutely. I think what will be fascinating is whether AI magnifies that problem or counters it.
And some of this may be unconscious as well. Back to the example you gave about the story of the date to the roommate and the mother, that I imagine even in a situation like that, it just may be unconscious in how you tell that story.
Definitely.
And how difficult it is then. I suppose as you frame it as the optimist that you are, it's an opportunity to make better decisions. I suppose the other way of looking at it is that there's a risk of making poor decisions, and there's a risk of building AI systems that may just perpetuate poor decision making. What use is that system?
Right, and I think you alluded to my Harvard Business Review article, and I started one of the articles with the fact that social media, for example, believes that it is a vehicle for sharing positive information and didn't recognize the downside of people magnifying hatred and fear. And we've seen as much or more of that as the positive sides of social media. And when you think about AI, it'll just be an extension of that. So it'll magnify whatever biases and people will learn to game AI just like they've learned to game social media, in my opinion, to get their agendas moved forward.
And so how do you clean that data up, right? Because any machine learning system is only as good as the data that is fueling that system. And as you mentioned, the Harvard Business Review work that you did, and for our Better Innovation audience, and we'll include links to this in our show notes and make it as easy as we can for our audience to find this information. But there's a great 1-hour webinar that they'll find online that was recorded just a few months ago, I think. Is that right, Bob? Back in July, about how to improve decision making. And then a few months before that, there was a piece in Harvard Business Review that you wrote, how to make better decisions and achieve better outcomes with AI. Tell us about that May Harvard Business Review piece.
Well, I think that what we were trying to get across as my company and my co-partners is the complexity of behaviors and how it affects data. So the fact that when people withhold, for example, salespeople tend to share good news and withhold bad news, but that distorts the denominator that calculates the odds for AI systems. And so that, in a sense, is a great magnification example of a pattern of behavior that's existed for centuries, I'm sure. And so we believed that with AI becoming so pervasive and technology allowing people to use AI to predict things, that if this weren't addressed, it would end up in the same way that social media has ended up, which is really realizing that it's unleashed something that they can't put back in the bottle, and they have to figure out how to better regulate the downside of the algorithm. And I think that with AI, an equal negative outcome is possible when people take data at face value. I think that we should learn from what's happened with social media, which is that people selectively share information to move their agendas forward, whether it's just to be better liked or whether it's to promote a cause, and that is not reality. It's just a technological manifestation of someone's perception of reality. And my thinking is the next article should be, whose intelligence is artificial, the machine or the person's? And I think that we carry a lot of perceptions that we don't often come to grips with as people. Things that we think are true often aren't. So when we say that systems, early AI, are biased, they may only be reflecting the data we give it. In fact, I know that's the case. What we're not
Right.
aware of is whether we're right or not about our beliefs and whether what we're sharing with data and systems are really an accurate depiction of what reality is or what we think reality is.
And Bob, in your work and in that Harvard Business Review piece, you compare an optimized AI system to somebody who has a high EQ.
Right.
Talk a bit about the comparison of an AI decision-making system and back to your point about the quality of the data and to the extent that you're building an AI system to mimic, right, a rational
Right.
decision-making, rational human decision-making system. You focus right on a person that has high EQ. Explain that a bit more.
Well, the example I've given in the past is a couple. One is trying to get the other to take out the trash proactively. And after maybe the third time of nagging the other person in the pair about not taking the trash out, the person receiving the message learns to tune it out.
It's no longer effective.
Correct. And
Maybe it's never effective.
That's exactly right. And that happens with systems all the time. And it's a dirty little secret in the SaaS industry, but engagement rates are notoriously low, even with some of the best-selling CRM packages and SaaS solutions. Engagement rates are very low and they fall off quickly. And it's especially a challenge with AI because you want a constant feedback on what's happening. If you don't get that, you're not going to get a good algorithm.
It's feedback, I suppose, and we'll talk a bit about the nudge and what the nudge can mean and the positive reinforcement, right? So you take level of engagement with CRM systems. I know that just last month, one of the major CRM providers just announced that there is an AI platform that they're releasing, and they're claiming that they'll have data from not just the particular company, but they've got data from many, many companies that they've brought together. So they can help predict the factors necessary that will produce a win rather than the negative factors that led to a loss, for example. But you're right, back to on the data side and the data ingestion, if the engagement level is particularly low, you're dealing with a very low volume of data to start with, then, aren't you? Isn't
That's
that
right.
inherently the problem?
That's right. And
People don't like to fill out forms.
They don't, and they don't like to be told they're doing something wrong. So I think in the trash example, somebody with high EQ realizes that they can't keep saying something negative repeatedly to someone or they shut off their listening. Somebody might decide with high EQ that they will pick their moment, and the one time their partner proactively takes out the trash, they thank them for that and they give them positive reinforcement. Well, systems can do the same thing.
There's a shot of dopamine in the recipient's brain that makes them feel good about that.
Exactly.
Right?
And it may
what
reinforce, it reinforces positive behavior. And systems can be set up to do the same thing, in my opinion.
People, we know that, or to your point, the point you raised in the article, the high EQ people in the world understand that, right? And is that the essence of the comparison, that we build decision-making systems that perhaps may just mirror poor decision-making, right?
That's
from
right.
Humans.
And I think that what we want are algorithms that learn about you and learn to not take what you tell it at face value, to learn to take it with a grain of salt the way we do when we listen to people, and to calibrate it, and then to develop an appropriate response that furthers the objective of sharing more information and making more positive decisions.
I love how you started the article. What if people don't act rationally?
Right.
What if they don't? And of course, we know that they don't. But talk a bit, Bob, about, so as you're building these systems and you have a plethora of data that may reflect poor decision making, how do you discover what's the bad stuff from the good stuff? How do you create better data inputs to machine learning systems? Knowing what you know, knowing that people make poor decisions, and unless we do something different, we're going to train these decision-making systems, these machine learning systems, to provide results that would not be optimized. So what do we do differently?
There are a couple of things. The first is that not every algorithm needs human input or observation. So, for example, we build systems to try to find accounting errors in mutual funds. And analysts' observations, we have found, aren't always helpful. It's better to just take the accounting information itself and run statistical analysis on the probability of error rates given different conditions. And the conditions that analysts see or the perceptions that they have about a potential error to us are just less important.
They may not know, right? They don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And so I suppose, not to oversimplify it, but it's about cause and effect, right? There's input and there's output. And if there was, in your example, if the output is an accounting error, right, then I think what you're saying, just to repeat it back, that there's a better way to determine the nature of those accounting errors than don't ask the analyst what they believe is the source of the problem.
And so spam is a good example. Spam has probably been one of the most successful uses of AI. In the early days, more people reported what they thought were spam, or they used that reporting tool. Very few people use that now. And the reason is that the algorithms are so effective at screening out spam that you rarely ever find something that you think is spam that's in your regular inbox. And at least the service I use is extremely effective at screening out spam. Didn't need my input and was able to basically determine that from objective features and data from its data set. So I think one thing is to not ask people to add data where their observations just aren't helpful. The other, I think, area is to then find those decisions where observations are really important, and observations are important because perceptions sometimes create reality, like in political polling, or what people think matters. And then what's interesting about political polling, and the reason statisticians got the last presidential election wrong, is they didn't realize that even though one candidate was more popular than another in general polling, they didn't realize that there'd be such a dramatic difference in the turnout rate for certain populations. And then they underestimated, for example, in exit polling, that people who voted for the current president were embarrassed to admit that, so they didn't participate in exit polling as much. And that resulted in poor predictions. The same thing is true with AI, I think.
In your article, Bob, you talk about you have four distinct areas where algorithms can be improved. Maybe let's just talk a bit. I think the audience would appreciate. The first was around AI and how to break patterns, right? Breaking patterns in the data. Talk a bit about, and then connecting that to the concept of a nudge, right? How to use a nudge to break patterns.
Well, the simple example that I put in the article was a large bank payment system. You've set up a payment, let's say, to a particular company, and the number you enter is twice as large as your normal average payment, and it'll just alert you. Another one that we're using in mutual funds is we're looking at how much time it takes to come to a decision. And if we know you're looking at something new, but you take half as long to reach a conclusion, we become suspicious. Our algorithm becomes suspicious, and it tries to requeue the same topic to another person or to you to make sure that you spend more time.
Just like a human, back to your example, somebody with high IQ would do, and using that first example of large financial organization, that somebody with high IQ, in that example, they saw that there's an anomaly in the data, that typically we pay this vendor somewhere between $1,000 and $5,000. We're about to authorize a payment for $5 million. That should be a break in the pattern, right? Despite that, you've created an AI decision-making system that recommended the approval, right? Despite that, but to train the algorithms to pause and to nudge and to break that pattern, because there's evidence that the decision that the AI system is about to make is completely different from what the past.
That's right. And again, I think that, we all, in a way, overcredited technology and undercredited human nature. That's what we believe, at least. And we think that you naturally, if you hear a pattern break from your spouse about some topic, your radar automatically goes up. So if you hear them all of a sudden talking about a topic that they normally don't talk about, that would raise suspicion for you as well. And you might ask, well, why are you bringing that up? Or that's not your usual topic. Right. I think that there are all sorts of things that we just do in human nature that we can actually model systems to do to draw out kind of different perspectives from people as well.
It's our radar, right?
Exactly.
It's our radar as humans that we can ferret that out. Something just looks off, right?
Exactly.
Something doesn't look right. And it may be conscious, it could be unconscious, but something in our past tells us that there's something happening that just seems different. So we pause. It's the gift of experience, I suppose.
Right.
And I'm a father of 3, and I just think of my own kids' maturity through the years of that you see decisions that they make that may not seem to be optimized, and the older that they get, the more experiences that they have. Is that what you're suggesting, is that we can build AI systems that mimic that human with the high EQ's ability to pause in those situations?
Definitely.
Okay, that's the first one. Second one, encouraging self-awareness with certain benchmarks. Explain that.
Well, I think that it's, even though Daniel Kahneman has said that he thinks that people don't pay attention to data they're given, which for somebody that's analytic, it's almost an affront, because we stand for, well, we'll share the information and people will make a logical decision. But still, if you believe something and the data contradicts that, we think it's worth trying to share that information with you. We also think that there's very low return on use in current systems. So systems rarely ever give you feedback. You share information, and I guess at the most you see how many likes you get or how many thumbs up you get. You count those. But what would be great is if it actually gave you deeper statistical comparisons about what you're sharing or what actions you've taken and where you are in ranking on something. I think people are intrinsically interested in how they rank. Rankings are always, I think, among the more popular posts.
Oh, it's the gamification of life.
Exactly.
I suppose,
and I think that you can take that a number of different ways on decisions. How frequently you share information to a sales system, for example.
As humans, we respond to that, right? If there are benchmarks and if there are real comparisons, and if the advice or the input is not so amorphous, but is grounded in fact, and it's grounded in comparison, certainly much more effective.
Right.
That may be a good lead-in, Bob, to number 3, using game theory. How could, and it's especially, and I love how in the article compare it to using the best of, for example, the chess-playing algorithms. And what is it about the algorithms in a game like chess that you think is relevant here?
Well, you make a move in its simplest form. You make a move, and then the opponent has to weigh your move against all options to maximize an objective. And in the algorithms we use are called sequential game theory algorithms, but essentially they're branches. You decide to do A or B, and then the counterparty has 2 choices as well. What we're looking for are algorithms that continue to track how you respond and what response the algorithm can make to elicit the best counter reaction from you. So let's say it's a sales system. You tell them that you think you want to pursue a deal and the sales system maybe disagrees. The sales system can tell you that's very low odds in a very objective, analytic way, like take out the trash.
Right.
Or it can be more, I think, thoughtful about providing you information without hitting you over the head or without covertly criticizing you, and kind of more tactfully steer you in a different direction or nudge you in a different direction. And we think that those kinds of workflows have really never been explored. We're really at a very simple stage in terms of workflows. You share a picture, you get a like. You share another picture, you get another like. And a lot of technology has been, frankly, used to sell advertising money. It's a very simple model. And we think that, particularly for enterprise decision makers or complex decision making, you really have to go deeper. And so chess algorithms to us are elegant. There are so many permutations that you need to consider. And we're really looking at kind of reaction, counter-reaction, and optimizing outcomes and objectives. And thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead, I think that's really important too.
I really like how you just said that. And back to your sales CRM example, I could think of a scenario around a decision-making system recommending a particular price for a product. It may recommend an opening bid to start negotiation for the price for a particular deal. And you can imagine that the algorithms for chess playing would be relevant because you're very interested in what will be the customer's response to this opening bid. And the give and take of a negotiation perhaps is akin to the maneuvers in a chess game. Is that
Definitely, definitely.
All right, the fourth one, Bob, the 4 of 4, right time for certain insights and action. I love this part of the theory, choosing and identifying when is the right time for, it could be decision making itself or for taking certain actions. Explain that a bit more.
Well, I like to do my thinking work super early in the morning. And people that work with me know that. So they know to send me an email that will require me to think for more than 5 or 10 minutes late at night so that I get it first thing early in the morning. And they've just learned to do that. I think algorithms can learn the same thing. We can learn, our algorithms at least, diligently track how much time it takes for you to respond to something, because we view that as almost a core DNA of behavior, how quickly you think about something before you respond. And I guess we have to figure out whether you're going to the bathroom or not, but we think that looking at that pattern of behavior and then optimizing the way the workflow presents things to you based on when you make the best decisions is a natural for high EQ.
I think about emails. I think about just the constant flow of them, and those emails are being received by someone that may not be in the best position to receive it at that time. And there has to be a better way to communicate that is more customized to the communication style of the recipient, or to your point, and particular to this particular factor here, the time of day that the person will most effectively receive that information. And you can imagine many applications of that, of how to make better decision making by just getting the person focused on it at their time.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the simplest forms of that. I just leased a car, and I'm presented with terms and conditions in the last 5 minutes of the negotiation. I'm just unwilling to read all those details. I might be very interested in some of the terms. I'm just really motivated to sign and get out the door. And you think about that pattern of behavior, a system should know when the right time for you to learn something is, when the right time to act, not only based on your personal behaviors and patterns and preferences, but on just general workflows, and when, like, it's probably better in the car leasing thing to present some of this information as you're doing research. You're doing research, you want to learn about the comparisons of the terms and conditions. That makes you a more informed buyer. Should the algorithm want to make you a more informed buyer, it would find the optimal time to present that to you rather than giving you eye-numbing, detailed, small font, 3-page scroll at the last 5 minutes of a transaction.
Are you optimistic, Bob, as we look out in the field of algorithmic optimization? Are you optimistic, look out over the next 12, 24 months, that we're going to see a step change in the effectiveness of machine learning algorithms?
I am. I think that you have to account for the fact that we are already dismayed at the early implementations of the internet. I think we're already seeing some of the downsides of social media and sharing, and I think that it was almost important for us to go through this learning curve as a society on what the downsides of technology were. And I think that individuals and companies will demand more. They'll demand more sophisticated systems, and they'll demand, I think, more elegant solutions. I also am optimistic in knowing that companies that invest the right time in this and understand that training algorithms is a marathon and not a sprint will end up performing better.
I think that is a great way to end this segment. It is such good advice. It's one of the reasons why I personally enjoyed, Bob, working with you and working with your team at OnCorps, the important member of this great Cambridge, Massachusetts AI ecosystem that we both love and enjoy, this Boston-Cambridge ecosystem. And we're all in here as we're recording this episode from the Advanced EY Technology Lab in Cambridge, and the optimization of algorithms and how important machine learning is. I look at it, the work that we do, either in the tax area in particular or broader financial systems, that those recommendation engines will become more and more important. And we need a certain level of R&D and innovation around algorithms. I think that you and your work at OnCorps have been such a leader in that space, and we appreciate that.
We've loved working with you, definitely.
Well, Bob, as a feature of our Better Innovation podcast, and also, as I mentioned at the outset, you are the first of our guests in our Season 3 focus on artificial intelligence. We've changed our 3 questions that we typically end each episode with this year. Let's just jump right into these. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right. First question, Bob. What book is on your nightstands? This is a holdover from Season 2. We love this question, so we brought it back.
One of my scientific advisors just wrote a book, Blueprint, Nicholas Christakis at Yale University, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through it, but it is fascinating. It's a book essentially tracing back, of all things, he compares shipwrecks and how the survivors organized socially and which ones didn't survive and which ones did. And Nicholas assumes that and makes very compelling arguments that we have sort of a DNA or a blueprint on how we operate with one another. He's very optimistic. He promotes in this book, Blueprint, that we actually have a blueprint that makes us want to survive and cooperate with one another. And that some of the malicious kind of hate mongering that's been going on in the news and media is actually a fluke, and that we actually have a social blueprint to want to cooperate and share. And so Blueprint, I think, has been a great book.
Oh, that is so optimistic in this time that perhaps, let's just say that some of the messages from the mainstream media are not as positive. And so that does give me hope. There's hope for us.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, you're on a roll. You ready?
Okay.
All right, number 2. How do you see AI impacting our personal lives today, and what are you optimistic about? And I say our personal lives collectively as humans. How do you see AI positively impacting all of our lives?
Well, I think there's been a lot of focus on the downside of AI, and I think justifiably AI, in my opinion, will have as much an impact on shaping the labor markets as any technology, manufacturing or information. I think it's going to have a profound impact. The upside of that, though, is that there has never been a better time for someone, irrespective of class or privilege, to learn, to really learn. I mean, the access to learning is enormous. And I think that even if it's the simple AI that helps construct for you recommendations about the next video to watch or the next article to read, if you have an insatiable appetite, but you don't come from a certain background or you didn't join a certain university group, it doesn't matter. And I think that AI, ironically, even though it will have this potential to obliterate a lot of jobs, it's actually presenting, as all technologies do, an opportunity for people to rise above it and to leverage it and not fear it, if you will.
I think we're finding that. I think that is so well said, whether it's in our professional lives or our personal lives, that we're seeing less fear about it and more hope and promise for how AI can enable what we do, make us better. And I love the way that certain professors at MIT talk about this. It's the collective intelligence, right? Collectively, man and machine collectively are better than either are singularly. And I think that's
right. And I try to tell my company, don't identify with a task. You're not a task performer. You should identify with an outcome. Your job is to improve outcomes irrespective of the task. If you identify primarily, like, what do you do for a living, and you name a couple of tasks, you're going to be in trouble in the next 5 years.
It is, yes. Tasks can become automated, right? Tasks are automated, and how do you uniquely provide value, right? The human judgment that no matter the machines and the great work, Bob, of you and OnCorps and others, but there's certainly something unique about our personal judgment that the machines have not been able to completely replicate. All right, last question, number 3 of 3. Who do you follow on social media?
Other than Kim Kardashian?
That was an obvious one for me.
I've been following Bill Gates, and I think that he has actually an entire website on what books are in his bag or his backpack.
I have seen that. He does.
I love it.
He's a prolific reader. I'd love to read like a third of what Bill Gates reads. Is it his philanthropic work that you're most interested in, or like his unique reading list is interesting to you too?
I just think he's open-minded to reading many different things. I mean, on his reading list are Blueprint, which is Christakis' book, but also he's got some comedian's book, Dad is Fat. I forgot the name of the comedian. But he's got a lot of different books, and he's very thoughtful about his reading list.
Great advice. Well, listen, Bob, thank you so much for coming into our studio here and recording. This is the inaugural episode of Season 3, and I can't think of a better way to start the season than the discussion that we had today.
Well, it's all uphill from here.
Thank you so much.
This has been Better Innovation from EY. Let us know what you think about the show by leaving a review or by reaching out to Jeff at jeffrey.saviano@ey.com or find him on Twitter at Jeffrey Saviano. Better Innovation is produced by the great team at Hogarth Worldwide.